Hey everybody, welcome back to Winning Birds Fail Music Speaks podcast where we fight depression with the power of music. I am your professional handicap host, James Cox, and I have another interview today. He came back before. We had him May 27th, 2021, so it's been a few years, about 4 years, right? Yeah, so Mr. David Ellefson. David, how are you doing, sir?
How you doing there, brother? How are you?
Good. Good. Well, thank you so much for coming back. And last time we talked about your album that was out, No Cover.
Hmm.
And that's fantastic. I still want to thank you again for doing this song, Not Fragile by Bachman Turner Overdrive. That's my favorite song on the album.
That is so funny you bring that up. God, I can't believe it's been that long since we talked. So that because that was like back in COVID days.
Yes,
So it's
yeah,
definitely
that was
been
about 2021. Yeah,
yeah. God, it's so
yeah,
funny because so BTO. I mean, I always give Kiss credit, for being kind of my first big music crush, if you will, and they were for sure the Destroyer album and Kiss Alive and that stuff. But really, for me, it started with Bachman Turner Overdrive, and in particular that
yes,
Not Fragile record, and that the Needle Drop. I'd go over to my friend John Stolp was his name in Jackson, and he had that that album. And I remember, the Needle Drop is, the opening, the bass line, and
yeah,
I didn't even know what that was. I'm like, what is that? I didn't even know what that instrument was, the electric bass, because electric guitars, it was all new. And this was, that album came out in 1974.
yeah,
And that was right around the time I started getting into music, 74, 75. I was 10, 11 years old. And then Kiss Destroyer came out in 76, and I got a bass guitar that summer. So right as I was, 11 and a half years old, I got my bass guitar and that's where the whole thing started, for me. And, it's funny because my life today is the same as it was then, regarding just, wake up, listen to tunes, get a bass, grab a guitar, start jamming, start writing, the whole thing. So it's funny that that and it's because with no cover. Just to touch on that for a minute,
yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted I wanted to just cover the songs I liked. I didn't want necessarily have to cover the hits, even though there's some
Right.
hits on there. Rebel Yell by Billy Idol, Eat the Rich by Crocus. So there's some hit songs, some singles on there. But for the most part, Sheer Heart Attack. To me, that was such a great song off News of the World. um, and with Doro and Bumblefoot, we could actually pull it off, and
Yeah,
then
right. Yeah,
Todd Kearns from Slash's band, singing Sweet FA, which was, the Desolation Boulevard album by Styx. I'm sorry, by Sweet was ran side by side BTO, and then the Styx Equinox album, these records that had Lorelei and Lady and all this, these early records, of all these bands. So yeah, I like listening to the No Cover record. I listen to it
yeah,
just kind of as a fan sometimes,
right.
and I go,
Yeah,
fuck,
yeah.
man, you know what? That's a damn good album, man.
It's
I
a
really
damn good
like that.
album, right?
It's a
Exactly.
damn good
Yeah.
album. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if you cover songs that you want to hear because I want to hear some you did that you grew up with, because I don't because I'm a big fan of music and I want to experience what everybody else experienced. I'm always looking for
Right.
new songs, new stuff. So yeah, yeah, it's so wonderful that you did what you wanted to do instead of what you had to do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And it's funny, even when Megadeth, when we covered Paranoid on the Nativity in Black album, Paranoid was the very first Sabbath song that I ever played when I was, I don't know, 15 years old or so in my cover band, probably my band Taz back in Minnesota when I was growing up. And I did not really understand Black Sabbath. It was definitely a generation ahead of me. It wasn't what I would call the hippie generation. It wasn't even though it came out, I guess, in 69, 70, whatever, Sabbath, to me was very much not part of the 60s, that movement, and it was heavy, it had riffs. So to me, it was kind of like Nazareth, Sabbath. These bands were kind of just ahead of then Sweet, BTO, Kiss, Styx, Foreigner, Aerosmith. I remember when, Dream On, if you're my age, when Aerosmith Dream On came out, I mean, that was just such a hauntingly beautiful, dark song, I always kind of look at it like, if rock and roll sort of started in the 50s, out of rhythm and blues, in the 60s, it was this wild experimental decade. And then by the 70s, it's kind of like they reined it in and started to get it a bit more focused.
Yeah,
Records were
yeah.
made better, performances were more, they
The
were less
sound wasn't
jammy.
clear.
Yeah,
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 exactly. They were more focused.
yeah,
Guitar tones were better. It's like suddenly, the talk box,
yeah.
the flanger, the wah wah, you know,
Especially when you
you
heard
know.
Dire Straits, guitar sound. That was amazing. I mean, that brought a whole new level to the guitar.
It's funny you say Dire Straits because you think of Mark Knopfler and then Lindsey Buckingham,
Yeah.
from Fleetwood Mac, who didn't, those guys didn't play with a plectrum. They played with their fingers, right? They were like,
Really? Okay. Yeah.
I don't even, I was funny. I was at the grocery store a couple of weeks ago and I heard a Fleetwood Mac song and it was this cool solo. It's a popular song. The name I forget it right now, but,
Yeah.
I was going, dude, this guy's not even using a plectrum, and he's freaking killing the solo right here. And it was, Fleetwood Mac was another band that was very cool. Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles, probably the long run. That was an album that came out, I think, probably in my sophomore, maybe my junior year of high school, probably my sophomore year. And
Yeah.
that was when I was starting to party. We're having keg parties, and when your parents leave town,
Good
you
old
get it
times,
up.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I played in the marching band. I played tenor saxophone and orchestra band, which meant I had to also play in the marching band. And I remember going out and in Minnesota, we'd go on the school bus. We'd go to these different towns, and we'd do the parades. For these different summertime parades. They were like the powwow days and these different things. These, Sherburne, Minnesota, Mountain Lake, these small little towns. And I remember listening to the Long Run, especially um, those shoes. That had that great. Joe Walsh had that really great talk box solo in that, and it was a solo, but it was also just a riff of the song, and to me that was my favorite Eagles record was the Long Run.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
I still listen to that, when I fly
Yeah.
on airplanes. I like that one.
My favorite Eagles album was the one that I think it's Hell Frozen Over or something. It's like one of the
Hmm.
live shows. I got it. That's a that was a gift, so I'm going to cherish that to live. So, um, yeah. So, okay. So we do have an album out now, called Unbreakable under the name Ellefon and Soto, Jeff Scott
Hmm.
Soto,
Yeah.
from the band Transcender Orchestra. Never seen them. But I heard they put on a banger of a show, every time they come to Columbia. Um,
Man, if you ever get a chance to see them, you have to see them. It
oh
is a
yeah,
phenomenal. I mean, it's indescribable. It's like Kiss playing Christmas music, but you know what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's the spectacle of Kiss. The songs are heavy. I remember my mom, God rest her soul. Now she would go see that. She got turned on to it, and she would go in Minneapolis. She'd always go every year to St. Paul, and and this was after Al Petrelli was in Megadeth with me, and she'd always say, she goes, "Oh, Dave, I could just see you up there and playing in that band," And I was like, "Well, maybe one day," you know what I mean?
right,
And it's
yeah,
funny because actually the last year Al was in Megadeth. Here's a little trivia. He had quit Megadeth during that last tour. He was done. He was actually had accepted. Paul O'Neill had called him, and he had accepted his place back in Trans-Siberian Orchestra. He agreed to stay in the group to finish the Rude Awakening live DVD that we did.
Okay.
Um, but things were pretty rough that last year in 2001, man. It was pretty rough there.
Yeah.
And so he was it's interesting because we were playing at the Fillmore in Denver, and he pulls me aside. He goes, "Hey, we're on the bus." He goes, "Hey, let's go outside. I'm gonna have a smoke. Let's go for a walk." And so he lights up a cigarette and he's like, "Hey, so I'm going back to work for Paul O'Neill, and I'm just letting you know if you guys need a replacement, I'll help you get a replacement. If you want me to stay, because I know you just got this DVD coming up, you know." So in his
Right.
thick New York accent, and he was cool enough to stay and finish it. And obviously, he gave an incredible performance. But then, as you know, the band broke up a couple months after that. But he actually asked me if I wanted to go tour with TSO that year, and I wanted to so bad because I loved it. He
Yeah.
earlier that year or maybe the year before, he actually we were flying to Japan, and he said, "Hey, check this CD out. There's a little something I played on, And I knew that of him being in Sabotage, but I was not aware of Trans-Siberian Orchestra and how Sabotage had morphed into TSO. And I remember flying into San Francisco for our connection to go to Tokyo and listening to it and going, "My God, this is amazing."
Yeah.
And I love Paul O'Neill's work. I love Hall and the Mountain King when it was Sabotage Megadeth Dio. That was when I first heard Paul's work. Then I kind of learned some of the other stuff that he did with Aerosmith as well. But man, I love Paul's productions and just became a fan. I became a friend of his as well. Over the years, but he so it's funny with then he gets Al. So fast forward, I end up not playing the TSO. The band breaks up. Megadeth disbands, and
Yeah.
I was too sick that year. Honestly, I was just everything that was going
Okay.
on inside of Megadeth. I was physically ill. I could not get better. I was going to doctors all around the world, and then in February, Dave calls me and disbands Megadeth, and suddenly I was healed in an afternoon. It was like the weight of all
Yes.
of it and all
Right.
of just
Just
it
washed
was
away, right?
crushing my
Yeah.
soul. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was free of it, and but Al and I remained great friends, and so it's funny he's got Jeff Scott Soto singing in TSO with him,
Yeah.
and Jeff's great there, and so Jeff and I have known each other a long time. Of course, we're all Ingve fans. We're all fans of what he did there, and um, I've gotten to know some of his solo work, just hanging out with him, listening to it, and really coming to appreciate, his solo work as well. And of course, in the Rockstar movie, which is one of my favorite movies ever,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
super cool. So yeah, no, it's been great making two records with Jeff. We made Vacation in the Underworld. Actually, we did that probably right around the time we talked back in 2021. We were probably working on that first Ellefon Soto record then. And then we this one came together pretty quickly, kind of unexpectedly. Andy Martingelli and I were working on the music as far back as 2023. I think we were working on the writing songs in up in London, in Wembley, and then kind of unexpectedly last year, I was in Europe doing a little open air festival down by Rome, and Andy and I were just kind of talking about next steps. What should we do next? And I said, I'd like to just maybe do a cover, and so we
Yeah.
should do Queen, Death on Two Legs, and because
Yes.
I
That's
love,
a
I
great
love,
song.
Death on Two Legs. It's like, again, that was the needle drop, right? That was the first
Right.
song on Night at the Opera, and such a fucking cool. That to me, that's like Queen's Detroit Rock City. You know what I mean? It's the
Yes.
needle drop.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
right. It's killer song. So and then right away, Andy's like, "Dude, we got to call Jeff." So I called Jeff, and I said, "Hey, man, you want to?" And he's a huge Queen fan, so I knew the answer was yes. He goes, "Hey, you want to do Queen?" So fuck yeah, brother. And I said, "Hey, not for nothing," to use an
Right.
Al
Yeah.
Pitrelliism,
Yeah.
not for nothing.
Yeah.
Would you be down for doing another record? I said, "Me and Andy pretty much have it written." He goes, "Hell yeah, brother, I'd be totally down." So, again, it was just kind of the right thing at the right time. Schedules allowed it, and I mean, man, we got all of his parts and the lyrics written and the vocals and everything recorded like within about 4 to 6 weeks done. I needed to get it done before he went back out with Trans-Siberian Orchestra,
Right. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
yeah, one thing about TSO is it's a set months of the year. So for
Right. Yeah.
those
Because
who
they always
participate
come.
in,
They always
yeah,
come to Columbia every Christmas, and I have to go see them
yeah,
this year. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah. So that's why with Jeff, it's like you kind of know, okay, look, pretty much from kind of mid October, late October on, he's out, so he's out until, January 1 or so. So, yeah, we were able to get it done. And, while he was out doing that, Andy and I were finishing up all the rest of the production of the record and getting it done. And yeah, I think I'm really happy with it, man. I love
Yeah.
listening to
Yeah.
it as a fan. It's nice when you can be a fan of your own work and kind of set back and
It
listen to
is.
it the same way I'd listen to a Kiss record or BTO. You know what I mean? I could listen
Right.
to it
Right.
and really dig it and go, God, that's a good song, man.
Yeah,
These guys are
right.
pretty good. Oh wait,
It's
that's
like,
us,
that's
so
me playing. Yeah, hell yeah,
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 no,
yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
The two songs that I really, really love on the album Unbreakable is Ghosts and Vengeance. The way that Ghost bleeds into the song Vengeance, that's great. And since you mentioned Rockstar, that's basically loose off of Tim Ripper,
Yeah,
Tim
the
Owens.
irony.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And I've had him on the show, but he's great. So that's a fantastic video. Have you always wanted to work with Tim? And like, what was the discussion like? Was it like gung ho for you? Or like, was
Well,
he kind of like,
two things about that. First of all, thank you. It's funny. Ghosts. A friend of mine in Phoenix
Ghost
was
is
just listening to
amazing.
the record.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah,
just messaged me. He goes, man, I love your new album. He goes, I love the song Ghost. I'm like, isn't that so funny
yes,
that this instrumental song. Andy
right,
came up with it on the first record, Vacation in the Underworld. I had more of a song that it was just a riff that I'd written in the studio, and I said, hey, hit record, let's get this, and it turned into a little musical piece, kind of more of a bass feature. And on this one, Andy brought that in. I thought, man, you deserve a spotlight on this. You should really have your own, kind of a TSO, kind of like what Petrelli does. He gets these featured parts in a TSO show, where it's guitar melodies, and no
right.
vocals, just a guitar melody. Which so Andy he really knocked it out of the park on that one. And you're right, Vengeance. So here's the interesting thing. So we're at Battery Studios. Our friend Alessio, he has a recording studio called Rogue Recorders, and he had just this last year moved it inside of the famous Battery Studios up in London. Now, Battery Studios is where they did the Iron Maiden records, Killers, and a number of the Beast. They did Def Leppard, High and Dry, and Pyromania there. They've cut Brian Adams, Waking Up the Neighbors. I mean, just these freaking killer records, man. These legendary records. So you kind of go, okay, where's the voodoo and the magic in the room?
Right.
And in fact, Andrew Watt just bought the console that was in there, and moved it to LA. And I mean, this is a famous console. Like, they recorded Clash records, they recorded We Will Rock You on that console, they recorded
All the
Nevermind the
classic
Bollocks by
songs.
the Sex
Yeah,
Pistols.
yeah.
Come on, just it's like that movie Grohl, Sound City, where he bought the studio, the console out of the Sound City studio, because it's where his career started with Nirvana. They cut Nevermind on that record, as well as Not Fragile from BTO. They cut that record there.
There
They
you go.
cut some,
Yes.
yeah, they cut Fleetwood Mac records there. They cut Cheap Trick, Heaven Tonight.
Yeah,
Okay, again, legendary shit, right? So Battery
yeah.
Studios is basically the London version of Sound City, where Mutt Lang and Martin Birch were like the staff producers there. So that's why, Iron Maiden happened into the studio. Guess what? Martin's now their producer, Def Leppard happens in there, and now freaking Mutt Lang is producing their records, so
Yeah.
legendary shit,
Right.
I'm just a fan of all that stuff,
Oh
but
yeah. Yes.
we're there, we're shooting these videos, and we were taking a break just for a minute, and our guitar player Walter comes down the stairs, and he goes, hey guys, he goes, I don't know if you saw this, but I think Ozzy just died. We're like, what? and he shows
Yeah.
this right. It literally just happened. That Sky News story that went
Right.
out, and of
Because it
course,
happened like a week after the big concert, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had stayed, in Europe through the summer. After the gig, I stayed behind so we could work at the Battery there and work on these videos for me and Jeff. And I was like, holy hell! I mean, just the finality, the gravity from the celebration of Back to the Beginning to now just this just heart wrenching sadness. And then it was like, well, that's literally then Andy Martingelli, he directed the Vengeance video. He's upstairs getting all the lighting, everything set up. He goes, okay, guys, we got to get this knocked out. And I'm like, okay, I'll go in. So I'm doing my take while literally mourning Ozzy. I literally learned of
Yeah.
his
Yeah. I bet
passing
that. Yeah.
a half hour before. I'm just like going, I'm glad you can't really see my face. I mean, I wasn't in tears, really,
Right.
but I was
Yeah.
just this
But you were
weight of
kind of
my
like,
heart.
don't you have to?
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're kind of like, can we just call it? Let's do this tomorrow,
Let's
kind
start
of thing. I mean,
right. Let's start tomorrow or next week or something to give me time to mourn. Yeah.
yeah.
Because Ozzy
So,
was a
so
powerful,
there's just
powerful.
kind of an ironic footnote of that video. Every time I see it, I just relive that
Yeah.
moment right there. I
Yeah.
mean, I literally that press release, that Sky News story just went out literally a half hour before my part
Yeah.
was recorded.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, back to Tim. Yeah, Tim
Yeah.
is fantastic. So
He is. He's such a good guy. Yeah.
he. It's funny. When he was in Judas Priest, we did a couple shows in Mexico. We played Mexico City at the arena and in Monterrey, Mexico. There's a big amphitheater there, and we had played. It was interesting because we grew up opening for Priest, and now at this point we were headlining over Priest.
All right. And
And
switch places, right?
yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I first met Tim at the hotel at the gym, and just said hello. And he's a sweet, wonderful guy, and I see him perform that night on stage, and next couple of nights, of course, and at these two shows, um, and then we became friends. He asked me to record on his solo album. Um, what was it? Play My Game or something.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, and Wendy Dio was managing him. And this is at the time when Ronnie James Dio had gone back to play with Vinny Appice, Tony Iommi, and Geezer Butler, and they called it Heaven and Hell.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And so Wendy put us. Tim asked me to go on the road with him that summer. This was 2009, so I did, and we came over here to Europe, and we did some dates with Heaven and Hell, and it was the last time I talked with Ronnie. Actually, after one of the shows, we had a really good hang, and he was just drinking some wine. We like basically closed the venue, some venue in Germany.
Yeah.
We're just hanging out
Yeah.
bullshit. It was fucking great, man. It
You're
was so
right.
great just hanging out bullshit and closing the place up. And then we played Download. Actually, we opened the main stage at Download that year, and it's funny because that was that at that gig, the agent John Jackson from the K2 agency who books Iron Maiden and Metallica, he booked Megadeth over the years, and he came to me and he said, and I was not in Megadeth at that moment, and he goes, "Hey David, I got this fantastic idea." That I want to do next year. It's called the Big Four. It'll be Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax. And he said, Lars and James are on board, and I'm flying over next week to go see Slayer and Megadeth. They're on the Canadian
Yeah.
Carnage tour. I'm flying over to go talk to them about it. And I think he'd already talked to Anthrax about it, and Charlie and Scott were on board. And I told John, the agent, I said, it's so funny because um, Dave and I had been talking. I said, I just got a text from Dave right before I left my house to come over here and tour with Ripper. And I said, I think I'll probably be back in Megadeth by the time we do this. I said things are
Yeah.
looking pretty good for me and him, and we're getting along well. And so, sure enough, So I actually knew about the Big Four before Dave and Slayer did. So
Right.
because he told me about it backstage, and then of course it happened, and I ended up back in the band, and so it's kind of a cool little full circle, with that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the Ripper's great, man. They came
Yeah.
through with KK's Priest. They came through
Okay.
Phoenix with Accept last year. And when I went down to the show to see the guys, I asked him. I said, "Hey, nothing. Would you be cool? Would you throw down a vocal on me and Jeff's new album?" He goes, "Hell yeah!" So
Yeah.
he was super agreeable,
Oh,
and
that's good. Yeah,
we
that's
did a
great.
great job
Yeah.
on it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I wish we had more time with you. We're running at the time actually,
Yeah.
but
Sorry, I'm
but
talking so
no,
much.
no, no, no. But I'm gonna talk to Sean and see if I can get you booked again for like that hour because I got so many things. I got you coffee. I got the books that I want to discuss with you. I mean, it's all good stuff,
Sure, I
man.
know.
Yeah, yeah. So
There's
all
a
right,
whole lifetime
yeah,
of stuff to try to fit in a half
whole
hour.
like that.
Well,
So yeah,
listen, James, it was great to chat with you again, man.
yes, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Thanks for doing what you do, and keeping everything current out there. So I appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Your appreciation for our new album too. Thank you. I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.
It's so great. It's so great. I'm gonna plaster it all over the place. When I upload this
Cool, man.
video. Okay. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, sir. I hope
Thanks,
you have a
dude. See you,
great
buddy.
day. Okay. Bye. Bye.
Thanks, man. Bye. Bye.